Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Shadow and Crystal Thorns, Fae and Crystal Thorns, Book 2 by K.L. Moody. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Healing had a way of mending even the fiercest rage, but Chloe stood face to face with an attacker who wanted her dead. Could she mend that much rage, that much pain? With trembling fingers, she latched onto her companion's hand. To heal, she'd need to stand, and to stand, she needed his help. The moment her skin met Quintus's, he flicked his gaze toward her with the kind of heat that should have made her rip her hand away in fear. Bravery had never been her strong suit. Maybe it never would be. But she knew that flash in his eyes had more to do with their attacker than with her. They needed a way out of this, and healing seemed like the only option. Quintus would try to fight. That would escalate the situation, but healing? Healing could work. They'd all be able to think more clearly once pain stopped dominating all their decisions. Now she just had to figure out how to heal the attacker standing ahead. Golden lights glowed among the black cave walls surrounding them. Normally the sight was as pleasant as the trickling stream rushing nearby. A sword marred that pleasant sight now, though. A sword and a glare that could slice just as cleanly. The young woman's thick black hair swung in a long braid behind her back. Murder danced in her eyes as she held her thin sword to Quintus's throat. A mortal like Moody doesn't belong in Faerie. Her incredible skills with her weapon would always be overshadowed by the stronger, faster, immortal Fae. That point became all the more clear when she jabbed her sword toward Quintus. The loose curls on his head fluttered as he ducked and drew a spear from his magical pocket all in a single breath. In nearly the same moment, he shoved Chloe's sitting body even farther behind his back. She'd be safer there, but she also wouldn't be able to heal Moody, not unless she could touch her. "Do you want to die?" Moody's voice resonated throughout the space with a darkness that seemed to suck the golden glows right out of the pebbled cave walls. Her long braid whipped behind her once more as she lifted her sword for another strike. Glares couldn't kill, not even in Faerie, but only the fierceness in her eyes could explain why Quintus suddenly stumbled back. Moody's nostrils flared as she glanced between Quintus's throat and his chest, probably trying to decide which target would cause the most injury. Chloe took the initiative to respond. "We do not want to die. So kind of you to ask." Pulling away from Quintus, Chloe grabbed onto the cave wall. Cool stone scraped against her fingers as she yanked herself up. This time she managed to get to a standing position where the musty, earthy smell of the cave became more pronounced. The carefree lilt of her voice caused the slightest crack in Moody's glare. It might have been promising, except then her nose wrinkled. Quintus clenched his jaw before glancing backward. "You know I will protect you no matter what, but can you at least try not to antagonize our enemy?" "Moody is not our enemy." Surety lined Chloe's voice even a little more than she expected. The resonating terror that had filled the cave earlier now softened like a dulled blade that could still deliver blows, but perhaps ones that didn't slice as deep. Doubt flickered across Moody's features. It didn't last long enough to matter, though. Soon her face hardened into one that promised a slow and painful death. Everything in the air changed then. Even the water flowing nearby seemed to slow, as if rushing faster might incite Moody's anger enough to burn it all away. Quintus took a step back. One of Moody's eyebrows twitched as her gaze shifted over to Chloe. "You left me. You abandoned me right after my friend died. You chose the Fae over me, just like Portia said you would." Her hand gripped her sword so tight her knuckles had turned white. With quivering limbs, she moved the tip of her blade until it pointed not at Quintus, but at Chloe. A growl erupted from Quintus's throat then. It didn't seize the air with terror the way Moody did. Instead, it filled the space around them with the kind of fervor that could light a candle without any magic at all. He whipped an arm back, shielding Chloe completely. When he spoke, even mountains would have bent to his will. "If you harm a single hair on her head, I will tear you limb from limb, and then I will dig out your heart and throw it into the depths of this cave." The words did little to deter Moody. Her sword still pointed ready to strike. Instead of frightening Moody, the words had somehow turned her contemplative. "I don't know what to do," she spoke under her breath in a hesitant whisper. "This land does belong to the Fae, but it's not right for us to steal it. But we shouldn't have to die either. We were all brought here against our will. Shouldn't we be able to stay if we want to? This was it. Chloe could feel it like a squeeze in her chest. The moment to act had come. Yes, Mishti had her sword in position, and Quintus had his spear drawn. The words Mishti said when she first entered the cave still hung in the air. I've been sent here to kill you. But if an attack was really going to happen, it would have happened by now. Despite Mishti's ability to chill the air with a mere scowl, she clearly didn't know if she even wanted to be there. Unfortunately, both she and Quintus had enough stubbornness to wait. They'd probably stand there threatening each other until they died of starvation before they gave up. As someone who did her best to avoid danger of all kinds, Chloe was especially skilled at assessing threats. This cave was safe as long as no one made any sudden movements. She pressed herself up against the crystalline cave wall, doing her best to stay out of Quintus's peripheral vision. If he noticed her sneaking forward, he'd just jump in front of her and shield her even more. She couldn't have that, not now. She had to get to Mishti. The young woman may have looked like violence incarnate, but a little healing would still soothe her soul. It could mend the pain that had brought her here. Quintus would be angry. He didn't want Chloe to reveal to anyone that she could do magic, especially not to the mortal's fiercest warrior. But since their only other options were to be attacked or die of starvation, Quintus's opinion really didn't matter right now. A feeling deep in her gut told her the truth. Healing was their only way out of the situation. Whatever consequences followed would just have to be dealt with when they came. After getting into position, Chloe finally made her move. She sucked in a breath and hopped forward. Everything moved too fast to process after that. Her left foot landed with a thud at exactly the wrong angle, causing her to lose her balance immediately. Quintus reached both his arms around her waist while she also shoving his spear closer to Mishti's chest. He soon had Chloe pulled tight against his chest. Mishti just stared. Her mouth gaped open wide as her gaze lowered. After a beat, the tip of her sword met the hem of Chloe's dress. Quintus narrowed his eyes while a grunt escaped his clenched teeth, but when he tried to jab his spear forward, Chloe grabbed his hand and held it back. Considering he had at least 7 times as much strength as her, the weak attempt only slowed his jab. Luckily, it still kept the spear from plunging into Mishti's chest. Her long black braid bounced as she stepped to the side to avoid his blow. In the same step, she managed to lift Chloe's hem just enough to see the one good foot standing underneath. Pushing the dress up even higher, she then saw the end of Chloe's other leg. The wound on Chloe's right leg had healed, but her foot was gone. Portia had chopped the foot off during the fight at Crystal Thorn Castle, and Chloe was only just reconciling the fact that it wasn't just missing. It was gone forever. Mishti didn't quite gasp at the sight of it, but a gnarled breath tugged through her throat. When Quintus tried to drive a spear at her again, she slapped it away with her sword. Accusation filled her eyes as she stared at him. Can't you heal that? I thought Fae were supposed to have extraordinary healing abilities. The unwavering determination in Quintus's eyes did what shouldn't have been possible. It wavered. He hugged Chloe tighter around the waist and took a step back. Mortals can't regrow limbs. Chloe spat the words out. Her heart skittered as wildly as it had when she'd read those same words in her magical book. She'd hoped the book would tell her how to heal herself. Instead, it simply told her the foot could never return. Quintus tugged Chloe closer and glanced down at the chopped off end of her right leg. His voice came out tight. I have another solution for her that will work just as well. The foot he had carved from a block of wood still sat on the ground behind them, just finished before Mishti appeared. Chloe doubted very much that it would work anything like the foot she'd had when she woke up that morning. It would in no way be just as well. But once he figured out how to attach it to her leg, at least she wouldn't have to hop around anymore. Judging by the wrinkled nose Mishti now wore, the thought of a missing foot disgusted her. Or maybe she was disgusted by the fact that her leader Portia had chopped the foot off and left Chloe to die. Without thinking, Chloe pushed against Quintus's arms that held her safe. She moved past them and hopped forward with the kind of blind conviction that would probably get her killed. When she stumbled and lost her balance again, Mishti caught her. Quintus snarled and lifted his spear. Stop! Chloe shouted the word, not which only slightly slowed his strike. Mishti is not our enemy. If she really wanted to kill us, she would have attacked already. And she wouldn't have bothered telling us why she was sent here to kill us. But Mishti still had murder in her eyes. Shadows filled her pupils as her hand squeezed tight around Chloe's arm. You abandoned me, she repeated. Chloe gulped. Fear prickled at the back of her neck. It climbed across her shoulders and down into her hands until her fingers shook. Fear burned inside her, ready to swallow up any control of her limbs that she still held. This same feeling, this complete paralysis in the face of danger, had seized her many times before. She'd always been powerless to stop it. Maybe she could heal others and use her research skills to solve tremendously difficult problems, but those skills were useless in a fight like this. What good was healing when... Healing? Her thoughts snagged on the words even as fear took over her body. Her muscles had already seized up, but maybe she didn't need to move them much. She just needed an injury. After the fight they had just had in Crystal Thorn Castle, Mishti had to have some sort of injury. Yes, there. Just under Mishti's jaw and up to her ear, a burn blistered across the skin. It hadn't been treated and likely hurt terribly. The burned skin shifted as Mishti gritted her teeth together. That small movement probably heightened the pain even more. Perfect. Fear still prickled across the back of Chloe's neck, slithering like ice down her spine. She couldn't speak when overcome like this, but she managed to squeak out a whisper. Quintus, I need your arm. He lunged forward at the words. You have more than my arm. You have my entire... Before he could finish the sentence, he had moved close enough to touch. He'd busy himself with trying to free her from Mishti's grasp, but Chloe only needed the slightest touch. Once her skin met his, a shower of golden sparks burst from her fingertips. His voice cut off at the sight of it. He opened his mouth wide again, probably ready to lecture her about how they didn't want the enemy to know she had magic. But it was too late for that. Whatever consequences followed, this had to be done. At the same moment, Mishti's eyes went wild. The sight of the magic immediately released her hold on Chloe. It dropped her jaw. It forced a gasp from her throat. I give her magic, Quintus nearly shouted the words. He couldn't lie, so his statement was mostly true. The magic had come from Faerie itself, and it was Chloe's magic, but she could only access it while touching Quintus, so in a way it did come from him. Still, he had clearly only spoken those words to hide their greatest secret from their enemy. But Mishti wasn't their enemy. She just needed a little healing to mend the pain in her heart, and then surely she'd join their side. After the golden sparks subsided, Chloe reached for the burn under Mishti's jaw. Chloe closed her eyes and imagined every part of the healing process from beginning to end. Her magic only worked if she knew how to heal the wound. If she could heal the wound in her mind, it would heal in real life. A smidgen of belladonna helped with pain relief on the burn. Honey kept the burn free from infection. Some lavender-infused olive oil served as an ointment that healed the burn over time. Such a severe burn would have taken weeks to heal, but with her magic, Chloe could imagine the entire healing process in only a matter of seconds. And as she imagined it, the magic made it happen. Soon, Chloe pulled her hand away to reveal Mishti's dark olive skin. It had healed completely. Quintus reached for Chloe again. He lifted her right off the ground with one arm under her knees and the other behind her back. As he stepped away, Mishti gingerly touched her newly healed skin. How did you do that? Her sword clattered to the ground as she reached to touch the skin with both her hands. Seeing the forgotten sword, Quintus slowed, but he still stepped away. Chloe looked straight into Mishti's eyes before she spoke again. I'm sorry your friend died. She swallowed over the lump in her throat and tried again. It would matter that Chloe remembered the girl's name. I'm sorry about Mila. Just like she guessed, Mishti's eyes shot up at the sound of the young girl's name. Chloe pressed her eyebrows together. I would have helped her if I could, but you know I couldn't have. I think deep down you know it's not my fault she died, it's Portia's. Mishti sucked in a hard breath as she'd been punched in the gut. Portia. The word punctured the air. Mishti's hands balled into fists. Portia killed her right in front of my eyes, but she still managed to convince me it was your fault. Come with us. Chloe sat up as high as she could while still in Quintus's arms. For the first time since she appeared in the cave, light melted through the shadows, darkening Mishti's eyes. But the shadows returned a moment later when Quintus spoke a single word. No. With a little huff, Chloe turned to him. What do you mean, no? I mean, she cannot come with us. But I want her to. She deserves to leave her manipulative and terrible leaders. Chloe, Quintus said her name with just enough intensity to silence her completely. He helped her onto the ground again at a spot where she could rest her back against the wall. You need sleep, and I do not trust that young woman to be anywhere near you while you are in such a vulnerable state. If I could stay awake all night to keep watch, I would allow her to come with us, but his arm rested on the cave wall just next to her head. In that moment, his eyes lowered to the ground while defeat overtook him. I need rest too. The urge to pull him closer nearly engulfed her, but Mishti's lingering form managed to stifle it. It only took a breath before Chloe spoke again. I have a better idea anyway, Mishti. You should go back to Portia and the other mortals. Mishti's eyes narrowed to that terrifying glare that could wilt flowers. Only temporarily. Tell her you killed us, Chloe grinned. Then find out Portia and Julian's entire plan. Tomorrow, meet us at Crystal Thorn Castle at midday. Once we know their plan, we can then make our own. A twitch of a smile worked at Mishti's mouth. She nodded. It took another few moments before any of them moved after that. Mishti and Quintus still eyed each other, shifting from trust to mistrust with each breath. Chloe flashed a smile. Somehow, it worked. They both stared at her, and then Mishti nodded again. When she did, Quintus nodded too. Maybe they didn't trust each other yet, but they trusted Chloe, and for now, that was good enough. After whirling around, Mishti disappeared out of the entrance of the cave. Once gone, Quintus raised an eyebrow. I do not know if I will trust her enough by tomorrow night either. Chloe shrugged. At least we'll get one night of good sleep before we have to worry about it. He folded his arms over his chest in response. This is going to work, her voice faltered, which forced her to swallow. It has to. The fact that his pursed lips relaxed did nothing to ease the tightness in her chest. Chloe had to swallow again. We may have rescued Alora and Brannick and saved Crystalthorn Castle from the mortals, but Faerie is still poisoned with iron. We have to heal the land in order to save my home in the mortal realm. Chloe tucked a hair behind her ear and closed her eyes. The thing she'd been trying to ignore since coming to Faerie now puddled in her mind with the threat of becoming a flood. She could barely speak the words out loud. We have to save Faerie in order to save my sister, Grace.